Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, and I'm continuing my build of the Estes Sentinel, this vintage kit that I am kind of cobbling together. Alright, it is time for the fins. Yeah, it's time to attach the fins. So, I'm only going to attach the main ones in this particular round of gluing, so just these guys. They should be all set, they're all rounded and sanded pretty straight. It's still the vertical element here I'm not 100% satisfied with, so before I start this I'm going to quickly just sand it. Actually, I'm going to use the block here, I think, just a little bit. It just doesn't feel quite flat. Yeah, that looks a lot better. I'm not sure why, but when I was sanding just on my pad here, and my pad's flat as far as I can tell, it was just not coming out true. So, if they're not straight, they're not flat here, they're not going to, well, they could, but you're going to have a hard time attaching them straight to this. Alright, so before I actually do any gluing, I'm going to do some measuring. Now, the main fins that I'm going to attach today, they do go directly at the end of the body tube, so that's easy enough. But the other stuff, well, the secondary fins, the little canards up front, they don't. And then there's the launch lug. So I'm going to take care of both those things. The top fins, it says in the instructions, go 4.5 inches from the end of the tube. So I'm going to mark that on the fin lines anyway. 4.5 is there, and there, and there. Now, this is the launch lug, so that one is going to be at 8 inches. I'm actually, remember, I ended up using a launch lug here that I had already split. I'm going to put one at this mark, and I'm going to put one at the base of the rocket, so back here. I think that's probably the most stable option for this. And then again, I've got 4.5, and that should be all of them. Good. Alright, now, I have to take the nose cone out now. Well, no, I guess I don't really. Yeah, I probably should. Because these are swept back, so they're going to attach like this. I'm not going to be able to stand it up until the glue sets on all of them, so I'm going to have to at some point flip it over and then check alignment upside down, at least for a little bit. And it's going to have to rest upside down anyway. So yeah, got to have the nose cone out. Otherwise, it's not going to balance. Alright, so let's get down to this. I've got my glue, I've got my dowel over, well, wood scrap over here, ready to spread. And let's add some glue. So a thin layer, spread it out. You can see the stick here I just use and use and use, and eventually it'll break or I'll lose it, probably break. But I'm getting a decent sized glue ball on the end of this. I'm going to have to cut that off pretty soon because it gets increasingly difficult to use it when it's just kind of this blob of this growing blob of glue. And as fun as that is, it does get a little awkward eventually. Alright, so about 30 seconds, and then some more glue, a little bit more glue, not much. There we go. And then spread it out again, and should be ready to attach. So I'm hoping that this goes pretty well, but this is fairly, it's not all that wide, and it does stick out pretty far. So they're going to be a decent amount of force on this. Alright, so I'm starting at the back, and I'm going to roll it forward along the line, trying to make sure that I keep get the front bit right on that line. The back bit, basically clamping it, not really clamping it, but holding it in place with my finger, my left hand finger. So hopefully that's pretty well, that hasn't moved very much. I'm pretty confident that this is not vertically aligned at the moment. That's okay. You know, I want the glue to set a little bit here so I can carefully adjust it without things falling over. So we'll just let that sit for another 10 seconds or so. That ought to be, well, it's certainly not going to be set. We don't want it to be set yet, but it should be enough that we can adjust things slightly as necessary without everything falling apart. Alright, so let's take a peek. This looks like it's still pretty well aligned. And alright, I'm going to spread out the excess glue that was on this side. Got a paper towel for hand wiping just off frame. And spread this side out too. This is like the beginnings of a nice little fillet here, so that's always good. And then I'm going to take a quick peek for alignment. It looks like this is warped. So it looks like the back here is, yeah, the back is not on the line. The back should be like here. That's interesting. I didn't really think that these fins were warped. It might have been the way I was holding it. And of course, then it falls off completely. Well, I guess we're going to try to reattach then. Alright, well, it's back in place. Hold it again. Almost. There we go. I'm going to use both hands pretty aggressively here to keep it on the line. Yeah, so two of these fins, remember they're two separate sheets of balsa that these fins came out of. And this one and the next one, they felt, it was, you know, I was concerned that I was going to snap them in half when I was rounding them. So it's possible that they did have a bit of warp to them, which would be unfortunate, but it's good to identify that early in the process. Alright, so I'm looking down this now. It looks much better. Because what I was seeing was, it was fine here, but then I could see a lot of fin on this side when I checked. So hopefully that's better. I don't know about how well the glue is going to hold here, so I need to be extra careful with this. Alright, well, let's go on to the next one. Remember, this is somewhat time critical because the faster you go, well, the less the glue is set on the pieces that you've already done. But by the same token, the slower you go, if you take too long or you just stop entirely, then you won't be able to check for like multiple fin alignment at the end, right? So I do need to work with some speed here. I want to let some time, build in some time here so that this fin, especially this fin, since it was a little wonky, has time to set up so that when I'm attaching the other ones it doesn't fall over. But I also don't want to take so long that I end up, that they're firmly, or at least the first one is firmly glued in place without me fully checking to see how well aligned the four fins are to each other. So there's kind of like a butter zone for this. Alright. Excess glue, second layer. Number two, the more glue you use, it's not like more glue makes it stronger. More glue just means it's going to take longer for the other glue to set. Alright, well, let's hope that this is set well enough that it's not going to just flop over the instant that I turn it. Now, this is kind of the danger point here. Alright, so I'm going to attach this fin. Just hold it for a good 30 seconds. And then again, I will check alignment. The danger zone, again, of course, is when the one fin that you've just glued is parallel to the ground, because that means there's a lot of force trying to fight that glue. You know, gravity is pulling it down, so it wants to spin, it wants to rotate around the point where you anchored it with the glue. Generally, you know, like when I do the next fin, well, the first fin will be perpendicular to the ground, so that will be less risky because it's not trying to, there's no torsion. It's not trying to twist. But it will have also been on there longer, so there's less risk of, the glue will set more. Alright. I'll try to smear that out a little bit in a moment. Let's check alignment. Yeah, this one looks, well, it's not vertical either, so let's try to adjust that. But it also looks a bit warped. It looks like the back is not, again, in line with where it ought to be. So that's not great. It is possible, too, that it's not that they're warped so much as the root of the fin that I sanded is not, it's not even. So part of this is like kind of floating up in the air, and I think that's actually what's happening here. All right. Let's have a look again. It's not vertically right, but the warp appears to have gone away. That's good. All right, just trying to adjust to make it straight up and down. All right, we'll put the finishing alignment on that at some point, but I think that's probably pretty good for now. Continuing on, 2 more fins. Yep. As usual, another 30 seconds or so. Try to clean up my mess here. A lot of stuff just kind of kicking around on this table. Be nice to have things somewhat more orderly than this, but I don't know. Just as something that escapes me, eludes me more often than not. It's a goal, I guess, to be more orderly in the future. I mean, fortunately, everything I need is still here. It's not like I lose things. It's just that other things tend to get in the way that I don't need. All right, second layer. This fin and the last one, they are from the other sheet of balsa, and they seem to be, I don't know, more durable. They were a lot easier to sand. I didn't feel like I was going to snap anything when I was doing that. All right. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach this one here this time because I don't really trust the fin that is now pointed down. I do trust this one a bit more though. So, all right, let's try to get it in place. For the last 2, of course, you have to worry about there is going to be a fin pointed down. It has to. There has to be one. So that is, you have to hold it up farther off the mat if you're going to do things this way. Now, I will say that there are definitely, you could make your own, or you could certainly buy a jig or a tool that would help you get the fin alignment here right. So it basically just kind of holds the tube in place, and then it like clamps gently on the fins to keep them in place, and it also works pretty well to align things. Now, I don't happen to have one, so I can't give you an evaluation of whether or not it's something you want to do, but I haven't felt the need for it. There have definitely been a couple stray kits that I've built where I felt like, boy, that would have been really helpful because whatever I was doing here just didn't go very well, and I ended up, a couple fins flopped off, and I had to re-glue the whole thing. But that generally is pretty rare for me, at least in recent memory. And I say that, and everything's gonna fall apart immediately on this kit. But it is something to consider, especially if you find this part of the build to be particularly irritating. Alright, so I don't see any warp in this one. I'm going to check my direction now a little bit closer to get the vertical alignment. Ooh, that was a little too hard. That didn't quite flop over, that's good. Alright, I think that looks decent. Alright, so one more. Yeah, these fins, the risk is generally when you have not a lot of surface area that you are gluing, and so like the root edge is very thin, so the thinner the wood, and then the amount of surface area that the fins is taking up is pretty high, especially far away from the body. So this one, this could definitely be a rough attachment. Hopefully we don't end up with that being the case, but yeah, you never know. Alright, it's probably good. Time to go for the last little bit of glue. Just a little bit. I definitely need to clean that spout here. So I did end up brushing some glue around. Here we go. Alright. Last fin then. And this is the freshest one, so that one's the one I'm going to have to worry about if I have to worry about anything. Let's get that all lined up. And down it goes. Whoops. Shoot. I lost my grip momentarily. I'm going to have to try reattaching. Yeah, I actually, now that I'm looking at this, the back end here of this fin too is kind of floating up in the air. So I'm guessing the root edge didn't get sanded flat. Now, that's not great, you know, but it's not something like, oh, well, I'm going to rip the fins off and sand them down and try it again. No, it should be alright. I mean, most of the fin is still properly glued in place, and there is a little bit of a gap at the very back of it. Hopefully, when I put fillets on this, that'll take care of most of the problem. But getting it attached properly is going to be a little bit, this part isn't going to go quite as well as it could. That's evidenced by it didn't go quite as well as I had hoped. It's not terrible, mind you, but certainly room for improvement. Alright, that last one is really crooked. Let's just gently bump that back up to true, or what appears to be true. Alright. Now, I'm going to check for alignment. The fins are still a little malleable, at least most of them are. And now is definitely the time to make sure that everything is in the right place and that they're all pointed essentially in the right direction. This one does not look so hot. It looks like it's way below where it ought to be. It looks like it ought to be shifted up quite a bit. That just, that's my feeling on it, like my gut feeling looking at it. Fortunately, there's not a whole lot I can do about that. I can try to gently nudge it. Or that could happen. Yeah, well. Yeah. Alright, well, this is going to be... I'm going to have to do some re-glue here, one way or the other, because this is quite loose now, having bumped it, adjusted it. But it needed to be done. It was way too far off, as far as I could tell. So sometimes the lines that you draw on the tube just don't reflect reality. They're not they're not quite right. And that's maybe because you didn't follow the guide quite right, or there could be half a dozen reasons for it. But unfortunately, in fooling around with that, I obviously knocked the other fin off, so I'm going to have to re-glue this one. Now, there's already some glue on this, so I'm not going to start from scratch, but I'm going to go with just one thin layer here. And I cleaned up the fin a bit. I'm also going to try to clean some of this off the side. All right. Okay, the fin nearest to me is the one that I just reattached, so it is the weakest, so I need to be careful of that. And it's, yep, there it went. Ah. So yeah, all this talk about, oh, I don't need a jig. Well, maybe I do. All right. Oh my goodness. Yipes. All right. Well, I need a pause here, so I'm gonna have to do a decent amount of cleanup work here. So I'm gonna pause this. I'm gonna clean up the fins, and then I'm going to go into a next stage and try this again. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in part whatever, the next part of this.